So here's how it all started that April night in 1998. Contact event number 8, Hornby Island, April 1998, and I was 20 years old. So after I went to bed, I awoke to a commotion going on outside the tent. I am now certain I know the state I'm in, and I'm technically still sleeping, but I believe I'm being pulled out of my body gently. There is a distant hum or buzzing in the environment, so I know I saw lights through the tent, and in my dream mind, I assumed a car was on the beach. I reported that throughout my body was an intense energy that in the moment I framed it as feeling powered by God. I'm now fully convinced what is actually happening is the removal of my light body, that part of me closest to my oversoul, being pulled out from my physical body. This could also be framed as the core of the dimensional body put into me during my fifth contact event. A force or sensation was calling me out of the tent. I reported, next, I recall standing outside in my clothes with the moon lighting up the field in front of me, the wind and loud ocean waves hitting the beach. At this very moment, I'm now actually convinced that I'm not yet formed. I would be best thought of as a blob of energy, but I'm not aware of it. I'm actually right here, facing towards the beach, but able to turn my head and see the craft. And all these years later, I'm certain I'm placed here by the craft itself as if it's able to control it and control me. And I'm not trying to move, but I'm in shock. I report, in shock, I was witnessing a large spherical object with beautiful, dazzling rainbow lights shifting all over and a red band vibrantly glowing in the middle on the other side of the field. It landed right here, about 300 feet from me, in an indentation surrounded by trees. The way it was placed was bizarre, as if it was hiding itself from any other possible observers, except for myself. I was scared and felt very vulnerable, with only my little tent, but I was in some type of altered state because I'm not trying to run away. This object feels intimidatingly intelligent, yet I was flooded with feelings of connection to this large orb, specifically that I was going to go in that object. So now that I have a greater understanding of many of the contact events, I can see patterns I didn't notice previously. Before I get on craft, it appears certain moments are designed to be staged to create psychological processes. And that's what I think is going on here. For the 20-year-old, an answer is hitting his psyche. At the time, I believed whoever was responsible for the rising was coming to take me away. This moment is ingrained with the rising's significance, that it was real and it was important. And there was a mysterious origin to it. All of it was being, implanted into my psyche at the time. I was looking from the side of my eye when the object went dark. So I'm still facing this way, kind of just placed here. And I'm looking from the side of my eye when the object went dark, and quickly a door opened and a ramp folded down. This was the moment I wanted to move, but I couldn't. So at this point, there was panic going on, and I was in a state of anxiety and fear. And that's when I heard a calm voice in my head say, "It's all right." Then an eerie, bulbous headed, short creature came out of the sphere and floated towards me. From the angle of the moonlight, its eyes looked black. It was the way the moonlight was coming down. Its eyes looked black and sunken like a skull. And so that just scared me even more. Then, as this creature had floated halfway across the field towards me, it made me the me that knows them. And what it is, it's from within. The elder changes me over to their realm, right? She's connected to me and she can do this on the spot. So when that happens is when I believe I've materialized fully, body and clothes. This is bilocation, which I have some understanding of now, all these years later, and how this can even happen. But I'll get into that in the reflection of this video. But I materialize fully, body and clothes. Though I believe I'm a copy because my normal body in the tent is sitting there, it's sleeping. So I'm like a I'm like a hologram or an astral projection, if you will, of myself. As I become the me that knows them, there was an instant recognition with this being. It was the elder, and the leftover imprint of the last contact event with the anticipation of our agreement, it became crystal clear. The bizarre spiritual awakening that initiated my travels was the beings fulfilling our agreement of helping me find my soul. I was in absolute shock at this realization. The reason that I had left Coquitlam and the spiritual awakening that had burdened my mind for months now had all been part of a plan. As I was piecing everything together, she landed about 3 feet in front of me, unfroze me, and then I began to bawl. I began to just cry. I wrote, I was facing a harsh new reality. I was now living in two worlds, one in which I was lonely, isolated, and confused about the mystery and meaning of the rising, and the other in which I knew and understood the truth and my own involvement in it. I had so many emotions, feelings of failure for everything we were working towards, anger because I trusted them and I didn't know it would be like that. And on top of it all, I just felt so lonely from having isolated myself. And all those messages from HG that influenced me to leave my life, it was clear they were the source of that book. At the time, it was so mysterious to me that I almost believed the book wasn't even real, as if it materialized only for my purpose because of how perfectly it triggered my awakening. There was also something else that lingered in the back of my mind at this time. It was evident the entities were continuing to isolate me. This began with them breaking me up with my girlfriend, the third contact event, which had only occurred a year and a half prior. My 20-year-old self knew it was being isolated because I had their genetics and was related to them, that I was one of theirs. As for the state I'm in now on the beach, I was the higher self embodied, the light body, which was being expressed or touched in my travels through the spiritual freedom. Yet I had the mind of the 20-year-old, lost, confused as to his purpose, and isolated, who didn't know what he had gotten himself into, and scared for the newness of it all. How intense the aliens were that they could drive you to isolation. So the wailing and crying I'm expressing is from my subconscious core that is exposed with all of this trauma, which is why the crying is so intense. As the elder watched me, her eyes projected warm compassion for my pain. She was like projecting this warmth. I physically yelled at the elder, "You said you would be there for me, that you would have my back." The reason I easily remember her saying she would have my back, which are her words, right, in the fifth contact event, is because that was in linear time, the same as this contact event. So I have linear memory of our conversation. She said, "We were, but you didn't recognize us. We couldn't reveal ourselves, but we were there. You would have felt us." And then it's just shock at the realization that I did feel them at the peak of the rising. I write about it. I wrote about it in my journal at the time, at the 2001 journal I have. I wrote that it felt like aliens were involved, but I didn't understand, so I didn't act. The elder held my hand and I collapsed my head, crying emotionally. Now, this moment is interesting. I have a clear memory of it, but then I can't provide a description of the texture or feel of her hand. And I now fully understand why. We are both in an astral form. It's like we are holding hands, but with our body in loose or fluid forms, which is why I describe the experience as warm sensations of compassion and protection surrounded me like a cocoon. As I was extremely emotional, bawling with my eyes closed and head hanging, I then realized we were floating to the craft holding hands. Again, being in astral form is what makes this moment make sense. As at first, I didn't even notice. I didn't notice we were floating until it kind of like I start waking or opening my eyes. And then we're floating over top of these fences. And when you look at the location, it makes sense why we are floating, as the craft is on the other side of these wood fences. As we approached the craft, I could see it was a roughly 20-foot tall metal sphere with landing pegs holding it up. She put me down at the entry ramp, and then she walked in first and I followed. And this is the actual location of where that craft was placed. Inside the craft was a single spherical room with two medical beds along the wall and a pilot station in front with a screen. So this is the door. These are the medical beds. That's the pilot station. There were two tall medical beings in here, and they were projecting intense feelings of care and concern for me. They were concerned. They had care and concern for the state that I was in. I sat on one of the medical beds, so I sat right here, while the elder stood beside me, giving me her full attention, projecting compassion, again, all from her eyes, this kind of intense feeling of compassion. One of the medical beings began driving the ship, and I could see on a screen we were rising into the night sky. I was calming down from their care. I asked, "What's going to happen to me?" Still crying and everything. The elder said, "You're going to live out your life." So she's just attached. My other me was so messed up by the rising, the way the mystery of it haunted my mind. But now I knew the answer, so I raised my voice telepathically. "But I'm wrong. I'm living a lie. I know the answer. I can't live like this. This is unfair." She said, "You're right, but we need you to. It doesn't feel like it, but it will all come together in time. There's more to come." "What do you mean?" She said, "Our agreement continues. We will continue to be with you." I really thought all my interactions with the beings would end after they helped me with the transition to discover my soul. Without having something we were working towards, I didn't understand at all why they would still be in my life. I was still emotional when I noticed on the screen that we were approaching a tall black object with irregular angles. The stars were in the background. We were going to outer space. We seemed to have blipped through into a hangar, as I didn't see any bay door open. As we landed, the door of the craft opened, and the two tall beings walked out. But I wasn't okay. I was in too much shock about the realization about living in two different worlds. So before we got out, I said to the elder, "I don't understand how to do this." Now, what she does here is very interesting. She locked eyes with me and turned on a white light in her right eye. This method was reminiscent of the blue vortex in the last contact event, in the seventh contact event. In our closeness, I felt she had an aspect of herself that humans would consider angelic. So she had some ability to turn on an angel presence in her. Now, in non duality, seeing a higher self makes you feel your own because everything is within you. So you experience your own oversoul at the sight of another. That's what happens. That's what a unity state really does. You put yourself onto that level because it's all within you. What comes from her eye is the white light of the oversoul. So technically, she elevates me in this moment, having me connect with the me from the white room, the core of the dimensional body. But because it was all expressed in the rising, what's actually happening is a sensation of fulfillment. The thing I was trying to achieve or hold on to in the rising, I become. So it has a lot more purpose than I ever realized, and the way it's fulfilling something in this moment. So I wrote in the book, it wasn't exactly a communication. The feelings could still be translated to, so it's all coming from her eye, right? "Don't be scared. Nothing bad occurred. You didn't do anything wrong. You're growing and we are here with you while you do. You will eventually be able to balance what we gave you. It will be hard, but you have already proven your strength. You left." So all of this stuff is hitting the right emotional needs in the moment. And so she's rectifying my emotional mind so it can contain the oversoul embodied. It's also obvious to me now the reason I let go of all my attachments, the reason the rising occurred the way it did, to leave all my attachments, commercial society, family, friends, identity, sexual desires, was for this identity behind the physical form. And this thing that she did with me had me feeling like I needed them on my travels, like the elder was watching over me, like a guardian angel. So this reorientation she did calmed me down and gave me the strength to let go of the confusion. I just became this other identity. the embodied oversoul, but still housed in the mind of the 20-year-old. Another way of framing it is a hybrid, hybridization of my higher self from the White Room and the 20-year-old mind. So we walked out of the craft into a massive hangar. I saw all these different types of objects, discs, long tubes, and pods. Realizing I was somewhere I had never been before, I was absolutely amazed at the sight as I followed the elder down a gray walking path in the middle of the hangar. So it would be like right here. And it sent us to a large door. So this was the door. And then we turned left down a hallway and then left down a thinner walkway to a transporter at the end in the wall. She turned around as she stepped on it and it zoomed her up, and I followed. So we appeared at the end of another walkway on another level. And as we walked out to a central hallway to turn right, we walked past a giant window looking down on Earth. So this is kind of the setup. And that's when it dawned on me that we are in outer space. This is a stock photo, so it's not, it's kind of a close representation of what I saw. A humanoid, by the way, in a blue uniform with thin arms and legs, so kind of a gaunt look to them, with large eyes with pupils and a slightly elongated cranium, walked by us. So this entity also had a slightly yellowish Caucasian skin complexion. This was the first time I had seen another being besides a gray alien, and I was reminded of my recent learning about the Federation of Planets. Now, which was on the seventh contact event. So I'm not saying it was tied to that, but I'm convinced now they were trying to put these pieces together, creating a space age connection with my experiences as I was in outer space. In the book, I say the vibe here was amazing and I felt great now. This is my connection with the Oversoul of the White Room. In my subconscious, I actually have the image of the man in the white gown in my head, like I'm embodying that feeling. Technically, I've been put onto the Deva level, and you could say artificially, with the experiment that we did. But there's a feeling of fulfillment of the embodiment. So we eventually walked through. We eventually walked down the hallway through a like to a doorway that was on the left. So that's where that doorway would be. And we walked into a red lit room, much like a dark room for photography, but less intense. It appeared to be a laboratory, as to my left there were two rows of connected computers stations with seats that faced a raised stage with a floor similar to white pane glass. On my right were three lifeless bodies in separate upright tubes, slightly leaning back. Two were 4 foot tall gray aliens, and the other was my first time witnessing a gray alien mixed with a human genetics, a hybrid. She told me to take off my clothes and stand on the stage. So I wrote in the book, the normal discomfort with being naked in front of people at that age wasn't with me here because in this environment, I felt genetically bonded to these beings, and they did not have sexuality. So I had to analyze my feelings here to understand exactly what was going on and the reason I was actually okay being without clothes in front of the elder. And it was much deeper than I initially wrote about. I felt like I was their experiment, my body and all, and I was compliant. I felt like theirs, and they were in control. The identity of the body stuff didn't mean anything. I had a natural knowing that I wasn't the body. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting. On the stage was a circular glass enclosure that I walked into, and she put herself on the computer. She put herself actually right here on this computer here. And so when I was in the glass enclosure, a thick white vertical laser comes out of the glass and fills the space and starts starting at the top and slowly making its way down to my feet. I could feel it without pain going into all my organs. So there was a sensation, right? And I asked, "What's happening here?" And she said, "This was a great task, so it's being recorded and filed in our system." It's wild, eh? So a bilocated astral body is basically a physical copy of my body, so much that they can scan it. And it's hard to know, But this bilocated form might be more closer to the dimensional body than my normal body. I don't know. It just might be pure, like a pure form of the dimensional body mixed with the physical body, which is why it all happens in. Which is why everything is happening in this state here. So I stepped off from the stage and walked up to her at the computer. From the computer, she pulled out a clear plastic, like kind of glass plastic tablet, like it was a large rectangular floppy disk, and from the computer, and handed it to me. And it was an image of my naked body in striking picture perfect detail. And it had a three-dimensional effect too. So when you turned it, I could see the inside of my organs, like the inside of my body with all my organs. And their script was on the right side as well too. So it kind of all the script is on the right side, and I could kind of read it. I would eventually be told that the object of beings put in my brain allowed me to do this. So the result was I could interpret their script through feeling when I looked at it, as opposed to translating the words as one would normally do when having learned a language. So, yeah, it's interesting. Notably, this was something I couldn't do before the rising, as I saw their script in my fourth contact event and I wasn't able to read it. Also, another important piece, this is not the Mystic book script. So, just these interesting connecting pieces, they're very wild. Regardless, I was unfazed in the moment as I briefly and passively absorbed the information on the tablet. I recently spent energy trying to recall as much detail as I could from this tablet. I definitely saw my name, and I believe in full form, Jeff Selver. I recognized the first four scripts to be my first name. Below my name was like a grander identifier of my location that seemed planet focused. I didn't see the name Earth, but it seems to be an identifier of our planet, which would have encompassed a title that described our dimension. But the label was a global label. So, yeah. Below the planet was information about having done this program with them. It was an identifier of this type of program that had something to do with biology, but that's all I got. Below, so there's my image, and then all that top information, and then below my image were numbered information like specs, something to do with cellular structure and chemical makeup. So after seeing the tablet, I said, "Wow, thank you for letting me see that." She then told me to go to a room to the left of the stage. So she's here, and she's pointing to there. So inside, it was empty, except for rows of horizontal lights along the walls, and a single bed attached to the wall, made for a human, about 2 feet off the ground. And the mattress was seamless with the shape of the wall. The door closed behind me as I walked in, and then very abruptly, the hybrid that was outside in the tube walked in naked, moving stiffly and mechanically, kind of like this. And I'm convinced stiff not because I think it was a robot, but because of rigor mortis, having the muscles not having been used in a while. It had green gray skin and small, pure black eyes, spaced further apart than a human's. So it had kind of a weird look to it. And I could feel the elder's essence within it was controlling it. And it might be better said that she didn't tell me to sit down, but that she came upon me and I moved back onto the bed. And she definitely controlled me in this moment. But what I now know occurred was that I phased out or blacked out. And it's from the messages from the blue vortex in the seventh contact event. I got, I basically get overtaken by this deep subconscious command and I surrendered. And when I phased out, she controls everything, creating an erection. So this was how I described it in the book. My sexual energies were raised, so there was no sense of physical pleasure, and with no movement, she mechanically controlled the spot in my brain, which made me immediately orgasm. It was a powerful bonding reminiscent of our spinning in the White Room, yet I was overwhelmed with what was occurring, and it was all very quick. I wouldn't define it now that my sexual energies were raised. I would say I was the oversoul embodied, like the light body. in an astral copy of the 20-year-old self. So there was no sexual energy. That there's not raised sexual energies. There's no sexual energy. I would even define the moment as androgynous, strictly spiritual. And I now know she did move back and forth. I describe it as a powerful bonding reminiscent of the White Room because I'm certain I'm phased out, as programmed by the blue vortex in the seventh contact event. If you'll recall, the white light of the oversoul was in the center of that blue vortex. So I get phased out in my mind into this high state, almost unconscious, and it was blissful. So there is this kind of raised energy that goes along with it, and there is something loving about it from her side. It wasn't just biology, and the orgasm is like a bee sting in that area, and it all just happens. She does say, "Thank you for giving me that." And then she got up and walked away with the sight of the strange alien bum blazed in my head as she walks away. And now, what actually happens is the 20-year-old mind gets shocked by the pushiness, totally caught off guard by how it all got handled. And what I didn't know at the time, but how I can frame it now, is my chakras were all open. So all my energy centers were open. And then this event puts in a fear thought, a thought of distrust, and it gets lodged in my sacral chakra. But it's the beginning of fear in me during my contact. Sitting up, hanging off the edge of the bed with my hands holding the rim, I reflected for a moment that I was overwhelmed. I tried to collect myself and analyze my feelings. And I didn't like the feeling of how pushy that was. But in my heart, I felt okay. It was painless and now it was done. And I gave them what they wanted. So I listened to my heart and I felt okay about trusting this process. So there was like an oversoul part of me that's like, it's okay, it's all good. And I couldn't deny that everything felt normal or still okay in the process. I walked out of the room and the hybrid was back in the tube. So in that the hybrid was in that tube there, and the hybrid had been placed back into the tube. I got the impression the elder's gray body was sitting on a chair. So there was a chair like right here, and her body was in it, like sitting on the chair. And so there was an impression that she was on that chair while she removed her essence and controlled the hybrid, because she seemed to be regaining herself as I came out of the room and getting up off the chair when I walked in. She then told me to put my clothes back on. As we walked out, I could see my orgasm in the hybrid, and I asked, "What are you going to do with that?" She said, "We are going to make babies with that semen." Now, feeling like I was bonded to them genetically made this acceptable, but I really had no knowledge what they were up to in that moment. There is an innocent idea in my head at the time that it is simply about me, not knowing the larger implications of their need for genetics. But part of the reason I'm okay with this in the moment is because the elder activated the blue vortex message imprinted into me from the seventh contact event, which had me phased out in this higher self white room bliss that I barely noticed the semen extraction. So the kind of like, I didn't really notice it kind of idea is in me at the time. And it's why I'm accepting it and I'm okay with it. And because I unconsciously and intuitively knew my body wasn't fully there, it's how I just move on to the next thing and not really reeling from the emotional impact of an event that appears as, R. We walked out of the door. So this was the room here, and we walked out of the door amongst lots of different types of beings were kind of moving around and it was kind of an amazement. And I saw a female humanoid walking by with a brown hair in a kind of a strange, bizarre bowl cut. So some of the appearances were very strange. Large eyes that were larger than a human's, with pupils, a defined jaw, and alkaline nose, and dressed in blue and holding a tablet. And then I walked down to the right here, up to the window in which I saw Earth previously, and the elder came up and followed behind me. So yeah, as I mentioned, this is a stock photo that was close to what I saw, so I used this. Though the site was more, when I was there, it was more straight on, not this kind of angle over the Earth, but more directly on. We were facing the dark side of the planet with a crescent on the light side to my right. And I estimate that we were about 1,500 to 2,000 kilometers over the Earth, which is a low Earth orbit. And so, yeah, seeing Earth from space made me feel profound, bond and spiritual love for my planet. But there's something else. I have a glimpse here of my higher self. It's actually quite profound. I felt unity in this state with the universe when I looked out to the void of outer space behind the Earth. I feel God as the universe, but it's also natural in this state I'm in. Yeah, it's pretty wild. Beings were walking around behind us, and there was no sense that I stood out. The elder approached me from behind and projecting, feelings of gratefulness, and said, "We are done, and we are happy you did this for us. What would you like from us? Where would you like to go?" I said, "I want to see where you live, how you live." She puts up her hand like this. She's like, puts up her hand and says, "We live on Venus." "You live on Venus?" I was totally startled. It made no sense.